I feel a lot of self-compassion in what you're saying. Look into yourself, and when you're talking with people that you are agreeing with, and compassion when you're not agreeing with them. I mean, how does that play out for you when you're? And I was also very happy to hear that you meditate and all that, because it's just made such a huge difference in my life. I mean, it's truly liberating for me. I had so much trouble controlling my brain, and I don't control it now, but I'm much more okay with it. You know?
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, what you just mentioned right there, but it connects to what you're asking me. Meditation is not about controlling, as I understand it now, right? It's not about controlling your brain, but it's letting your brain be what it is. Like so many things try and control us every day. The liberation is literally, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Sometimes liberation is not even like an affirmative or defensive act. It's just the ability for things to be. Like we live in a world of constant interruption and non-consensual interruption. So to just allow things to be naturally and organically is so, oh, which is so powerful. Like liberation, emancipation, those are affirmative. Like you have to do things to experience that. But for our version of that to be something as simple as letting it be speaks to how constrained and confined this world can make us. And so when you talk about how do you have compassion with people who do and don't agree with you, it goes back to what you just said. And it's the fact that if I'm walking into these places trying to force people to become something, I'm as bad as what we're fighting against. I'm as bad as what we're fighting against. Assimilation assassinates character. So if I'm forcing you to assimilate into something, we live in a culture that forces me to assimilate into a culture that appropriates me, that appropriates my ideas, that appropriates my culture. So when I walk into rooms and I'm forcing people to become more and more like Murdock, I'm doing a different version of what we're fighting to stop. And
That's why
so
you're working so well with the kids, because you're not trying to make them like you. You're trying to just
validate who they are.
Yeah, yeah.
It's less about, we have to connect before we correct. Connect before we correct. Correctional facilities. We're talking about, those are words of imprisonment. Those are words of confinement. And that doesn't mean that we can't hold people accountable. That doesn't mean I can't want you to see, that doesn't mean I can't want you to be more, or I can't see more of you than you see in yourself. Like that's not this. That's not what I'm saying. We're not just supposed to let people be anything and everything whenever, because no, that's how people die. Like that's how people get hurt. When you don't warn them of the things that come in life. Like that's not what I'm talking about. And so to answer the question about how are you compassionate with people who do and don't agree with you, I'm not walking in there trying to make you agree with me. Shoot, I'm coming in to learn. That's the thing. I go in and have a conversation. I'm like, let's chop it up. That's what I come here for. I'm like, let's talk. I'm finna present you with something. All right, my framework on life. And a lot of people tell me they learn something from what I got to say. So prayerfully, y'all do too. But then once I share my little 10, 15 minutes, let's chop it up. Let's have a conversation. Because I'm going to learn things from you. You're going to learn things from me. And we're going to become more learned by the time we leave this conversation. That's progress right there. But folks, when you come into these environments saying, my goal for success is everybody's going to feel this way, you are taking out the autonomy of what allowed you in that room in the first place. No wonder you feel so like you can't accomplish nothing, because your frame of reference is jacked up. So for me, I don't walk in trying to have people walk out thinking the exact same way I do, feeling the same exact way I do. I go in saying, look, I care enough about you to share what I got to say. There's a lot of people I don't talk to because they compromise my peace. But there's people who I know want to hear what I got to say. And so I'm doing the best I can to share it with them. And that's all I do. I go in and I speak my truth. I share my story in a prayer that it helps the one to share theirs. That's it. Like I can't make it more simple than that.
Healing through creativity or empower creativity. What does that mean to you? Empower creativity.
Yeah, no, I'm again start intrinsically, right? Like that's something that's just big for me right now, as I'm sure was a theme of this conversation. it goes back to seeing value. So I was gonna mention this earlier. There's this mantra, right, going around in pop culture talking about you need to love yourself, right? Self-care. You need to love yourself. But you can't love yourself until you know yourself. And you can't know yourself unless you care about yourself. Because when you care enough to know, you can grow to love. And so if we have this goal of self-care and loving yourself enough to care for yourself, like you have to know yourself to do it. Like if we are in this place and space of saying we need to love ourselves better, you cannot love something you don't know. You may think you're loving it. You're loving your idea of what that thing is. You're not actually loving what that thing is. And so in order to love something, you got to know it. But in a world of so much knowledge, so much information, you got to care to know about something to develop the knowledge you need to learn to love it. And so when you talk about empowering creativity, when I think about creativity, I think about it intrinsically. I think about what can I offer that no one else can offer. I think about unique and creative, not as one and the same, but I think about creativity is like a spirit, not a process, but a descriptor for people who embrace their uniqueness. People become more creative when they take what makes them unique and they do something with it, right? That is being creative. You are being creative when you're taking what makes you unique and doing something with it, right? And so, but you cannot know what makes you unique unless you know yourself, and you have to care enough to know it. And the best creatives are people who love themselves enough to appreciate what they know about themselves, and it was first because they cared. And so when you talk about empowering creativity, we got to create environments for folks to be able to love themselves. They can't do that without knowing themselves. So we got to, how do we allow people the space to become more and more self-aware, to understand what they bring into an environment, the kind of trauma and the baggage that they bring, but also the tools for emancipation and liberation for other people, the talents, the skill sets that they bring, the assets they bring to the table. But you can't do none of that unless they care. And for me, I care more about myself when someone cared about me. And we live in a world that people don't care about people. First, not black folks. And as a black man who's learned to care, who's learned to love himself, I'm just trying to care. I'm trying to care about these kids, man. So, and I'm really just a big kid. I feel like a lot of us are really just big kids. Like we're all just big kids.
Don't lose that.
Yeah, we're all really just larger. And some of us aren't even larger. Like some of us are the same size we were like middle school. So we're just older kids.
Empowered service. What is empowered service? Empowerment through service. I mean, that kind of, you embody it. If you could define it in words or in actions. Again, story, that's your superpower story. Yeah.
That's a dope way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
The superpower.
Yeah.
I like that. The superpower of telling stories. That's dope. The superpower, that's dope. I like that a lot.
You can use it.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that.
All right.
Service, man, that's deep. So I've done a lot of reading back when I was in college about like the idea of service and like a service that's reciprocated, and the different levels of it, right? Because when I think about service, I think about a lot of people going to do like neighborhood cleanups and things along those lines, but that's very like one-sided, and it's also not. I want to say this the right way. True service is not something that you do for somebody else, because that assumes you're in a position. That assumes somebody else needs you, and I think that we do need each other. There's no question, but we need each other. Like someone doesn't just need me. Like I need them. Does that make sense? Like I need some of you and you needed some of me. That's why this is so beautiful. We are doing service right now because of what we're providing to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and here, I mean, I'll use not a story per se, but I'll use an analogy. I think oftentimes people consider service watching the YouTube video, not talking with the person who made the video. You're not watching my YouTube. You're not watching my Instagram. You're talking to the brother who makes it, right? I'm not looking at your website. I'm not browsing your brochures. I'm not looking at your newsletter. I'm talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about empowerment through service, I think about, to what extent do you put people in positions? One, because you're talking about empowerment. To what extent do you put people in positions to connect with people to do better for the communities that we're a part of? Right? How do you put people in positions to connect with people to do better for the communities that we're a part of? So many people seek to serve communities that, like, go to neighborhoods and do things in neighborhoods you don't live in, as if they need you when you ain't done nothing for your own block. And by you going on somebody else's block, you don't know the culture. You don't know that's the problem with policing. That's one of the problems with policing. I mean, again, I'm not gonna go there because we don't have enough time for that.
Yeah.
But under the current frame of policing, which is extremely problematic because we know where the roots are. But even if you agreed, like, with policing and all that kind of stuff, right? The fact that we don't have police officers who are working in the neighborhoods in which they live, that lack of cultural competency and spatial competency, is one of the reasons why the relationships with the community are so contentious. And so but that's people's idea of service, going elsewhere to do something for this group of people who need me so bad. Like, there's this savior complex, extremely privileged idea that is so problematic. When in fact, I think that true service, this is true service. And we're on Zoom on other sides of the country.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's about giving people, creating opportunities through example. Creating opportunities through example for people to connect and pursue their purpose for the communities that they're a part of. That is what, in my opinion, that's what it means to empower through service.